Communism in reality is not a political party. It is a way of life, an evil and malignant way of life. It reveals a condition akin to disease that spreads like an epidemic. And like an epidemic, a quarantine is necessary to keep it from infecting this nation.
The Cold War made America renew its values, invent new images for American virtue.
Men and women in all walks of life, we are shareholders in the greatest enterprise on earth, the United States of America, unlimited. Our strength lies in the character of our people, young in heart, independent in thought and nature, skilled of hand. American enterprise has harnessed fire and water, wind, sun, and soil to produce an abundance of everything.
Was communism out to destroy all this? American propaganda said it was.
Stalin said, "The whole world is aware that the Soviet Union demobilized its forces after the war."
Beware the big lie.
At home, Americans feared red subversion. Congress revived the House Committee on Un-American Activities. In 1947, the committee investigated Hollywood, factory of America's imagination.
Ever observed any communistic information in any scripts?
Well, I have turned down quite a few scripts because I thought they were tinged with communistic ideas. They haven't attempted to use me, I don't think, because apparently they know that I'm not very sympathetic to communism.
There has been a small group within the Screen Actors Guild which has consistently opposed the policy of the Guild board and officers or the Guild itself as evidenced by the vote on various issues. That small clique has been referred to, has been discussed as more or less following the tactics that we associate with the Communist Party.
If I had my way about it, they'd all be sent back to Russia or some other unpleasant place.
10 witnesses, the Hollywood 10, defied the committee's right to ask about their beliefs.
Are you a member of the Communist Party? Or have you ever been a member of the Communist Party?
It's unfortunate and tragic that I have to teach this committee the basic principles of Americanism.
That's not the question. The question is, have you ever been a member of the Communist Party?
I'm framing my answer in the only way in which any American citizen can frame his
then
answer
you denied,
to a question
then
which
you,
invades his, absolutely invades
then
his
you
right.
denied, you refused to answer that question. Is that correct?
I have told you that I will offer my beliefs, my affiliations, and everything else to the American public, and they will know where I stand, as they do from what I have written.
Stand away from the stand.
For Americanism for many years, and I shall
stand away from the stand.
Fight for the Bill of Rights, which you are trying to
take
destroy.
This man away from the stand.
Others from the film industry demonstrated their support for the constitutional rights of the 10.
Are you or have you ever been a member of the Communist Party?
I believe I have the right to be confronted with any evidence which supports this question. I should like to see what you have.
Oh, well, you would.
Yes.
Well, you will pretty soon. The witness is excused.
Either you completely cooperated with the committee, which meant saying yes or no to the question about whether you were a communist or ever had been. And if the answer was yes, as it was in my case, we knew the next question was who else was, and we certainly didn't want to go into that.
The 10 were imprisoned. With hundreds more, they were blacklisted, their livelihoods taken away.
People generally in Hollywood were pretty scared to have anything to do with us. Whereas before we went to prison, they had not been nearly as scared, and there were plenty of undercover arrangements that were made to write scripts under pseudonyms for a good deal less money than you were accustomed to being paid. There were a couple of possible suicides as a result of it. There were a good deal of misery.
Americans feared that the enemy would take advantage of their freedoms, that agents of communism were undermining America. A Soviet spy ring unearthed in 1946 led investigators to Alger Hiss, who had been a wartime foreign policy advisor. He was accused of passing secrets to the Soviet Union by a former communist, Whittaker Chambers.
Have you ever seen this individual who is standing?
I have.
Do you know him?
I identify him.
In 1935 was the last time that you saw him.
According to my best recollection, not having checked the record.
Now, would you remain standing a moment, Mr. Hiss? Do you know?
Hiss firmly denied that he had betrayed his country.
New evidence of communist activities in government circles is promised by the House Committee on Un-American Activities. Microfilm reportedly found in a pumpkin on a Maryland farm is examined by investigator Stripling and Congressman Nixon.
Richard Nixon, an ambitious young Republican, was convinced that Hiss was lying.
It is the intention of the Committee on Un-American Activities to pursue this investigation until we put the spotlight on those high officials in the State Department who are responsible for selling this country down the river.
Hiss was jailed for perjury. Nixon's name was made. He turned his crusade against communism into a weapon for Republicans.
It was what made him. It paved the way for his whole career afterwards. Anti-communism was a gut issue with Nixon. I mean, it was something he believed sincerely and deeply, but of course he was a politician too. And he was a Republican politician, and the soft on communism issue was hurting the Democrats. And of course he used it. He would have been a fool not to.
In America, patriotic enthusiasm for the democratic way of life reveals itself in a monster loyalty parade in New York. Everyone from vets to youngsters reveals his inborn dislike of communism.
Anti-communism became the language for a new, more defiant vision of America. Singer Paul Robeson was open about his communist sympathies. In Moscow, he was welcome.
Float that barge, lift that sail, you show a little grit, and you land in the jail. But I keeps laughing instead of crying. I must keep fighting until I'm dying, and old man River, he'll just keep rolling
In America, people were less friendly. Veterans of the American Legion turned out to demonstrate in 1949 when Robeson was due to sing in a concert at Peekskill, New York. The police expected trouble.
The slogans of the demonstrators, it went, go back to Russia, you white niggers, for instance, over and over. Commies, niggers, Jews. You got in, but you're not going to get out alive. Hitler didn't finish the job. We will.
The concert turned into a riot.
What the demonstrators have done is have piles of rocks. What the state police did is make the cars go out and go 10 miles an hour through that gauntlet. So the road, I mean, cars were smashed, the windows were smashed, the road was actually slick with human blood. And interracial couple just driving through happened to arrive at that moment. And of course they pulled the car over, they yanked the two of them out, and they said, "That's Robeson Jr., we got him." And they were gonna bash the black guy's head in. I was standing over with a baseball bat, and a veteran, man in uniform, Army uniform, said, "Wait a minute, that's not Robeson. I know the pictures. That's not Robeson. That's not him." The guy said, "Well, blankety-blank is with a white woman, kill him anyway." And the soldier said, held the bat, said, no, that's not the American way. You don't lynch the wrong nigger." And it saved his life.
Race hatred and the politics of fear had begun to merge. At home, the nation was angry and insecure. Abroad, communism was gaining force.
The atom bomb explodes again in the headlines of the world. President Truman announces an atomic explosion detected somewhere in Russia, 3 years ahead of the schedule expected by the West.
America's nuclear monopoly was over. Then came China.
Tragedy overtook China. Armed and equipped by Russia, red hordes brought ancient Cathay to its knees. At the end of '49, all China sags under the red yoke.
Communist leader Mao Zedong took over. America's Chinese allies, the defeated Chiang Kai-shek regime, fled with their followers into exile.
Americans have always had, most Americans, a special feeling, a special attachment, a special interest in China. So it seemed incredible to most Americans, uninformed Americans, that this country which we had lavished so much care and affection on, who we thought was so friendly, so many of their people had studied in America and so on, should turn communist, turn over to the other side. Many people felt that there had to be some explanation. There had to be some sort of a conspiracy, some sort of a plot.
Republican Senator Joe McCarthy blamed traitors in the State Department for the loss of China. He launched his own witch hunt.
Today, the most dangerous enemy agent is not so much concerned with the secret information about weapons as he is with infiltrating the necessary departments of the government and shaping and controlling the actions of our nation so that the enemy is progressively winning without even firing a single shot. Now, I intend to name names. John S. Service. And remember that name if you will.
I have never knowingly transmitted any information which was, shall we say, secret military plans.
Service was hounded out of the State Department.
I had trouble renting homes, renting an apartment in New York. And the companies, well, what did our stockholders say, you know? So the companies that I had known and had dealings with abroad, export companies, they said, sorry, we think you're a fine guy, but we don't dare touch you.
One communist. One communist on the faculty of one university is one communist too many. One communist among the American advisors at Yalta was one communist too many. And even if there were only one communist in the State Department, even if there were only one communist in the State Department, that would still be one communist too many.
President Truman tried to dismiss McCarthy's attacks.
Not a single person who has been adjudged to be a communist or otherwise disloyal who remains on the government payroll today. We're not going to turn the United States into a right-wing totalitarian country in order to deal with a left-wing totalitarian threat.
But leaders of the American Communist Party were jailed, and the persecution spread. Left-wing labor organizations were banned, radical groups indicted, demonstrations broken up.
And if they put the word commie on someone, that meant that that person was an agent of the Soviets. That meant that that person was dangerous and had to be done away with.
The FBI under Edgar Hoover used the national interest to justify any method of locating subversives.
We were using the same methods that Hoover accused the Communist Party of using, and that's getting people to spy on their friends. And this was one of the criticisms he had of the Communist Party.
I felt guiltless. What had I ever done wrong? I'd never even gotten a traffic ticket. And here I was called before, in public, a state Senate investigating committee about my beliefs. I felt very, very wronged, and I felt that I had to not only uphold myself, my reputation, but that of my fellow teachers, my fellow union members, my fellow citizens.
We would talk to children, if they were in college, about their parents, and we talked to parents about children, and we talked to the neighbors about those people, and then if someone did seem halfway sympathetic in the Communist Party, we talked to them.
It was totally damaging to what we deeply believed America was supposed to stand for.
In the 1952 presidential election, General Eisenhower, the Republican candidate, chose the red-baiting Richard Nixon as his running mate. Eisenhower mocked the Democrats for being soft on communism.
The future of this country belongs to more courageous men. It belongs to men who know that freedom's fight must be forever, relentless, uncompromising, and fair. It belongs to men who, today, are ready to bear spiritual and intellectual arms against an alien army of communist ideas.
To get elected, Ike needed the support of Joe McCarthy and his right-wing followers.
I spent about half an hour with the general last night. Well, I can't report that we agreed entirely on everything. I can report that when I left that meeting with the general, I had the same feeling as when I went in, and that is that he's a great American, will make a great president, an outstanding president.
Right from the beginning, he detested Joe McCarthy. McCarthy was the first-class demagogue, and Eisenhower just couldn't stand that type of person.
Eisenhower's old wartime commander, General Marshall, was accused by McCarthy of treachery. Intimidated, Ike dropped words praising Marshall from an election speech he made in McCarthy's home state.
He was roundly criticized for that, because it seemed to indicate that he was influenced by McCarthy.
In 1953, two Americans, Julius and Ethel Rosenberg, were convicted of spying for the Soviet Union. They were sentenced to death. They had young children, and their fate roused protests in America and across the world. For some young lawyers, the sentence breached the Constitution. They sought judges to get a stay of execution.
Judge Frank looked at us, and he says something that we have never forgotten. He said, "If I were as young as you are, I would be sitting there saying the same things you're saying, arguing the same points you're arguing, making the same argument that these planned executions are invalid. But when you are as old as I am, you will understand why I cannot do it. And he stands up, turns his back to us, walks away. And we're devastated. We began to sense something which in later years we understood so clearly. And that was that Jerome Frank, as the leading liberal judge, was terrorized himself and frightened by the atmosphere of fear in the country. That if he, as a liberal, would do something to save Julius and Ethel Rosenberg's life, he would be charged as a commie.
The Rosenbergs were executed.
He died quickly. There didn't seem to be too much life left in him when he entered behind the rabbi. He seemed to be walking in a cadence of steps, as if keeping in time with the muttering of the 23rd Psalm. She died a lot harder. When it appeared that she had received enough electricity to kill an ordinary person and had received the exact amount that had killed her husband, the doctors went over and pulled down the cheap prison dress, a little dark green printed job, and placed the placed the stethoscopes to her, and then looked around and looked at each other rather dumbfounded and seemed surprised that she was not dead. And she was given more electricity, which started again that kind of a ghastly plume of smoke that rose from her head and went up against the skylight overhead. After two more of those jolts, Ethel Rosenberg had met a maker. She'll have a lot of explaining to do, too. Thank you.
McCarthy now denounced leading Republicans and even senior army officers as communist sympathizers. But he had gone too far. Political opinion swung away from him, and his enemies gained courage.
The names of communists. You say to the army.
You've done enough. Have you no sense of decency, sir? At long last, have you left no sense of decency?
It all sort of came to pieces. And then there was this move to censure him, and he fought that very badly. Now, a number of us were advising him on how to handle that, and he agreed to everything we said, and then he did just the opposite.
You have been here trying to smear the staff of this committee. The young men who have been working to uncover communists, you jump up and run away without answering.
McCarthy's power collapsed as the politicians walked away from him. But the spirit of McCarthyism, the smearing of dissent as communist treason, stained American democracy for decades.